Hello Rebel Divas and welcome to my Writer's Den. Today I'm going to share with you a little vignette from my book, The Accidental Traveler. Now I wrote the book that and put a whole bunch of little vignettes, short stories, flash fiction really, of stories based on my travels, having lived in different parts of the world ever since I was a little girl. And today I'm going to share with you the story that I've called Tipping in Seoul. Seoul, I think, is it's the loveliest name that you can give to a city, isn't it? Seoul of South Korea. Since this is a video and you don't want to be listening to a talking head forever, I've decided to break this story down like I do the other stories into short episodes. And Tipping in Seoul has been broken into 4 episodes, and today will be episode number 1. So, are you ready for a story? Okay, let me start. It was my first trip to Southeast Asia. I'd done my homework, bought the maps, the guidebooks, the language guides, subscribed to local news channels to keep up to date on events and news, and even practiced basic sentences in Korean, in Thai, and in Mandarin. I can say hello and count at least up to 3 or 4 in all those languages. What I hadn't realized, however, was that no matter how prepared you were when you travel, you can never escape the idiosyncrasies and cultural twists that can take you down paths you never expect to go. I was on my way to Bangkok to start my first real job after college. Now, my flight started in Vancouver with a layover in Korea before my final destination in Thailand. And I had arranged to stay in Seoul for 2 full weeks to reunite with 2 girlfriends I hadn't seen in a year. Both of them had been exchange students at my university back in Canada, where I'd introduced them to my friends. I had invited them to student parties and barbecues. I'd taken them around to visit local sites, wherever public transportation could take us. I never had a car, so I did the best I could to show them around. It was my turn now to visit their part of the world, and I couldn't wait to see them. My Taiwanese friend, Gwen, was a junior professor who taught at one of the universities in Taipei. No one knew her real Taiwanese name because she refused to share it. We never found out why, but I suspected it was because she worried we'd have a hard time pronouncing it. Or maybe we'd just simply massacre it. So she'd rather us call her Gwen, which we did. Sumi, my Korean girlfriend, whose house we were going to stay in while we were going to visit Seoul, she held an MBA. She was on that exchange program in Canada for her MBA program. And she worked now as a junior executive in a very large South Korean company that you probably have heard of. The plan between Gwen, Sumi, and me, the plan was that I will fly from Vancouver to Seoul, and Gwen will fly from Taipei to Seoul, and we'll find a way to meet up there. And we planned the best we could, timed everything as well as we could, and we'd together meet at the Seoul International Airport. From there, we'd go over to Sunmi's house, meet her there, and then we'd start our visit in Korea, in South Korea, and travel across South Korea by ourselves the second week, but the first week we'd spend time with Sunmi. Now, Gwen had 2 weeks off from her job, but Sunmi, she only had about 1.5 weeks of any given year for herself, for vacation, and she's dedicated an entire week just for us, and we felt really grateful for that. So, after we met at the airport, Gwen and we hitched a ride together in a taxi, laughing, catching up, and sharing our excitement of seeing each other again after such a long time, and excited about our impending adventure in South Korea. We timed our arrival to meet Sunmi as soon as she got home from work that day, because you see, Sunmi's parents didn't speak English, and we didn't want to bother them, and we couldn't wait to see Sunmi. Once we got out of the taxi, we had to search for her her address, and we walked through a maze of narrow pathways between pretty row houses. It was a quiet neighborhood that we'd come to, and we cringed from the rattle of our heavy suitcases that made the sound that our suitcases were making on that the brick walkways. Towering around us, around these beautiful row houses, were the steel and glass towers of Seoul. If you hadn't looked up, we'd never have guessed that we were in the middle of one of the most busy and modern cities in Asia, perhaps the world. It was a city that was at once futuristic and nostalgic, a city of classic contrasts. We finally walked into this open courtyard that our friend Soon-mi's house was. Her home was made in a traditional Korean style, with a beautiful blue tile roof that curves at the edges. Gwen and I tiptoed across the courtyard, trying to not make our suitcases rattle so much, and we walked up to the main door, whispering to each other of the exquisiteness of this place. Soon-mi lived with her parents, as was customary for unmarried women, children, especially young women in Korea. From the minute we walked in, I felt that strong sense of deference that she had for her parents. They didn't speak English, so Soon-mi had to translate for us. Now, Gwen seemed to have a general grasp of things that were going on since she didn't live too far away. Taiwan is not that far away. But I had no idea what was going on most of the time. So here's what I did. I smiled and I bowed a lot. Whenever my friends bowed their head, I was nodding right there with them. I didn't want to come across as a clumsy North American tourist, and I wanted to make sure I did the right thing. And Seoul charmed us from the beginning. From the heated floors of Soon-mi's home, which is a beautiful idea by the way, to the old-fashioned architecture, from the magnificent mega malls to the beautiful green parks dotted among the skyscrapers, I was enthralled by Seoul. Soon-mi had very carefully planned our itinerary, driving us around in a fancy car to show us the best the city had to offer. She even insisted on paying most of the time and refused to take no for an answer. So here's what Soon-mi did. She took us to the ritzy shops where the price tag of a designer silk scarf was more than the plane ticket that I bought from Vancouver to Seoul. She took us to plush restaurants where meals were served in gold-plated bowls. We went to gilded drinking establishments where each toilet stall had its own TV screen and a personal assistant on the other side waiting to hand us a warm towel. The malls she took us to were palatial and extravagant, made for movie stars and the uber wealthy of the world, I thought. Not for a soon-to-be very junior editor at a Thai newspaper. But Gwen and I were guests, and as such, we were supremely well treated. We didn't have the heart nor the courage to object, lest we'd offend or hurt anybody, especially Soon-mi and her friends and her family. So we oohed and awed and everything. We took tons of pictures, we smiled for the camera, we bowed our heads a million times a day and made sure to say 감사합니다, thank you, in Korean. I wondered every night as I went to sleep, how am I ever going to repay Soon-mi? When she came to Canada, I took her by bus to see Stanley Park, and here she was doing all this for us. How could I ever pay her back? One day, in the midst of the week, Soon-mi's boss called her to come into the office. She gave us this news with dismay in her voice. She had no choice, it was urgent. That evening, her parents, Soon-mi's parents, suggested that they show us around instead. Gwen and I looked at each other. Now, Soon-mi's parents were retired, they were elderly, and they lived sedentary lives. The last thing we wanted them was to pry them out of their comfort zone, their comfortable home, and have them take us all over town with us. And knowing the extravagant hospitality Soon-mi bestowed on us, we just didn't feel that was right. We just couldn't have them do that to us. So we assured them that we would be fine. We were going to be our own the next week. The second week, we were going to be on our own, traveling all over South Korea. So we said, this is going to be a good test for us. We'll learn a little bit more and we'll get comfortable on our own. Though both Gwen and I had traveled extensively and we'd lived on our own, we were in our 20s at that time, in our respective countries for years, Sunmi's parents, they fussed over us like we were teenagers. But the next morning, we said a sad goodbye to Sunmi and told her we were really, really sorry that she had to go back to work. And we bowed goodbye to Sunmi's parents, and Gwen and I hopped on a bus and took off to the city center, feeling like we were playing hooky. I'm gonna stop there. Stay tuned next week to find out what happens to Gwen and I next as we go sauntering off alone into the heart of Seoul. So stay tuned next week for the second episode of Tipping in Seoul.